In this session, we're going to interview Holly Bates. She is one of the leading young leader trainers in the entire country of Canada. She has invested in hundreds and hundreds of teens, but she's also mother to three teens herself. So you're going to gain some great wisdom and insights on developing your teen's leadership potential. You're going to love it.
Welcome to another edition of Kid Lead Academy Training Series with Dr. Alan E. Nelson, designed to help parents develop their children to lead so they can succeed. And now, here's Alan.
Hey, I'm thrilled to have as my guest today I say a longtime friend, but we really haven't talked in person much. It's all been remotely. But Holly Bates. Holly Bates is a wife, a pastor, the mother of teens. But in my book, her cred comes because she is one of the best young leader developers in the country of Canada, our Canadian brothers and sisters. And so I love Canadians. I always say I'd move to Canada if it weren't for the weather, if you had better weather, right? But I live near LA. So I am just thrilled to have you, Holly. Thank you. And we're going to learn from you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And the weather's not so bad here. I just would like.
Okay. They always try to sell me then on the weather. So, all right.
Uh,
So let's jump in. So first of all, you're both a mother of three teens, but also you have coached and trained hundreds and hundreds of teens over the years as a lead young trainer. And so let's talk initially about that. I know you were working with and close friends with Jenny Caldwell. She's been on our program, but her primary coaching and training was with younger students, but then you would inherit her students and you take them the next leg of their lives. So how did you ever get into developing teen leaders, and why did it seem so important to you to train them how to lead?
well, from the beginning of ministry, my husband and I wanted to invest in the next generation. It's so important that you're always looking behind you and investing in that next generation. And when Jenny joined our staff in Burlington, she said, I hadn't actually ever heard of Kid Lead before. So I'd been, uh, developing young leaders and, we were doing the best we could. And she said, I came across this amazing curriculum. And she had already been developing the 10 to 13-year-old leaders. And she said, let's do this together. I'll do the 10 to 13, you do the 14 to 18. And so it didn't take much. I did a little bit of research and looked at the curriculum and thought, like, this is amazing. Like, I was sold right away. I'm pretty easy to convince, but right away I could see the benefit. And so we began this journey together where we were developing leaders from 10 to 18. They would go from her group to my group. We were partnering together. And so it was always important, but I'd say then in ministry, it becomes important because you're developing the leaders that you are using. You're always going, okay, who's going to fill this role? Who's going to come up next? And so that's always important. But then just even as my capacity as a leader grew, it began more about being net positive for leadership development, because you realize that when leaders are being developed and you actually are developing more leaders than your organization actually needs, you're able to share those leaders, and you're able to plant those leaders into other ministries, organizations, in your community. The whole community benefits. So even beginning to look outside of my context to say, this is a really important thing that we need to do, especially when we talk about developing ethical leaders, because that's just something that not a lot of people are focused on in these young ages. So it's amazing. I love it. It's one of my favorite things.
That is very cool. I can tell your passion. I love that. So you had tell me a little bit of the story, because you would graduate these teenagers, they would leave, they would go on to college.
Mhm.
But I heard a little bit about this episode where a president of a college ended up contacting you saying, "What kind of students are you sending to our school?" Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the president of the college called and said, "What are you doing with these students? Like, what is happening? The students are coming to our school and they are just, ahead above everybody else." At the same point, I was getting texts from some of our student leaders going, "I'm walking around, I'm planning these events. I feel like I'm a mini Holly here at my school, my university. Like I'm modeling what you showed us how to do." But the beautiful thing about Lead Young that I love is that the students are actually doing the work. They're leading. We're not just teaching them how to lead. We're saying, I mean, here's how to lead, but then go and do it. And so it's in those moments where they're doing it, where they bump up against challenges and things that happen, that you get to coach them. And those are the places that I think really make such a difference. The leaders that had come out of Jenny and my ministry had already done the things that they were being asked to do at college and university. So it came second nature. This wasn't the first time they've done it. It was, they were like, we know what to do.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story. And I think that's the cool thing. It's hard sometimes for people like me, maybe people like you, because you're in the moment, but the real benefit of developing future leaders is longitudinal, right? 10 years later, 20 years later, what's the difference? Because you're giving them a 20 to 30-year head start on other leaders. So just I think it's very cool that the college president recognized there's something different about what you're turning out there. So I applaud you for that. So about half of the curriculum for teens, which is Lead Well, focuses on these short micro projects that they receive coaching on. But then the other half is kind of focused on a big project they actually do. And you've done some pretty amazing projects. So just tell us about two or three of those that stand out in your mind that the students actually led, right? These young leaders actually led and the impact they made. Tell us about that.
Well, my even though I was developing leaders, I've always had a passion for reaching people in our community. So, all of our leadership events tended to have that slant to it. So, the first leadership event that we did, just pitched it to the students. What do you want to do? They came up with the concept. They wanted to do a princess tea for young families in the community outside of the church. And so we said, okay, let's do it. It started, I think the first event was 100 people came. And
Oh, no, wait, 100 people. So are these like parents and kids or mothers, daughters, fathers, daughters? What was it?
The first event was mothers, daughters. 100 mothers and daughters came to the event. It was a great success. Like, I don't want to minimize that. It was a great success. But as the students debriefed it, they thought we could do this better next year. So the next year, there was 300 students and the tickets sold out online. Like, the tickets were, next to nothing. The
300. Was it one event or did you have to do multiple sessions?
Well, it's still just one event.
Wow.
So they figured out they were like, we can maximize it. We can use different space. They did all the work to dream of how they could further develop this event. The church believed in the students. They pushed a lot of budget towards them. They said, we're going to give them the tools and the resources. So that was amazing. So then the third year that they did it, we actually grew. It might have been the third or the fourth year. We grew to 600. We did 2 events of 300.
What?
Sold out in less than 5 minutes. Like, people, they went on sale and people were waiting by the computer with the link because they could not wait to get into this event. I actually met somebody on a Disney cruise with my family that was from Burlington. And they were like, we've heard about your Princess Tea. Like, we need to get in this year. We haven't been able to get in. And this was completely student-led.
That's like a Taylor Swift concert.
And they just like, they did a fantastic job. I can't speak about this enough because by that point, the students were leading adults. They were leading teams of adults. There's no way that these
Okay, time out. Sorry to interrupt, but I guarantee you there'll be people listening to this who are thinking, oh yeah, it was a group of adults that were staffing it with teenagers. You're saying the teens were leading it and adults were staffing underneath the teens.
Yes.
Is that right?
That is right. So we did a couple things because Jenny and I were doing Lead Young together. So the 14 to 18-year-old group would at first go and recruit the 10 to 13-year-old group. They'd go upstairs. Lead Young and Kid Lead were happening simultaneously. They'd do a pitch to the students up there, and they'd collect their first batch of leaders, put them all into roles. Then we'd pitch it to the church, and they'd, you know, collect. So, I mean, an incredible story. I had this young leader, Amy. She is one of the things we would always teach the students is you don't have to be an expert in the area, because say we had a kitchen team. I mean, the students aren't experts in the kitchen, but you can take your leadership skills that you're learning and apply them to a group of any age, even skills that exceed your own in the kitchen, but you can give the leadership and direction that you need to give them, because this was about leadership, not about culinary skills. And so Amy, she was the kitchen lead. So she organized all the kitchen team. And I just saw her the day of the event, and she just went, I love leading. Now, Amy was a student that was in our youth ministry that you would never pick. She wasn't like the magnetic leader. She wasn't the upfront leader. She wasn't the preacher or the worship team. She wasn't any of those things, but she is a fantastic organizational leader. And so here we were with this ministry to young leaders that allowed gifted students to really excel. And she like knocked it out of the park. She led people 3 times her age. She organized, developed, she had training meetings, she did it all. And today she is actually training to be a medical doctor. She has a heart to do work overseas. And she's an incredible leader, and she's using those skills that she learned at Lead Young.
I love that story. And I think sometimes I've studied leadership for years, and I think sometimes we in society get sucked into the stereotypical charismatic leader, and we say, oh, that's what they are. Actually, sometimes the charismatic people, whether they're old or young, they're actually not leaders. They're more PR people, publicity motivators, but they don't organize. And it seems like a majority of really effective leaders are a little bit more laid back, but they have the big picture and they implement really well. So I think it's so cool that Amy discovered that. I think it's even cooler that you and others empowered them. How cool for your church to take this seriously, and how cool for the adults in your church to be on these teams. Because I think we all like to be well led, right? It doesn't matter whether you're old or young. I just want to be well led. But I just think it's wonderful that you and Jenny led this vision and that your church allowed that vision to percolate. Why do you think, because you've seen so many, and okay, that's one example. I want to hear another one down the road, but that lends itself to this question. Why do you think adults tend to underestimate leadership potential of teens?
I think that there's a few reasons. I think that society has basically, maybe put a lid on young leaders and said, here's probably as good as they can get. They're going to be a subpar leader. So I think, a lot of people bring that into the equation. It could be, maybe it's just because they haven't seen it happen. They haven't experienced what could happen with these young leaders. I think that there could be, could be because of insecurity. If we're not careful, we can be threatened by younger leadership, a younger
Interesting.
generation.
Huh.
So I think it could be a number of different things, maybe different for different people. But I actually believe the opposite, that if I can see potential and develop it and see it flourish, that's even if their leadership far out, like if they're going to be a better leader than I'm going to be. I always say, I hope that the ceiling of my life is the floor to my kids' life and the leaders I'm developing, that they actually produce bigger, better, more influential things than I do. That's the best place to be in,
I love that phrase. I'm gonna steal it. The ceiling of my life becomes the floor of their lives. That's leaving a leadership legacy, and I just love that. So you're not just a trainer, but you're also a mother of three teens. So this course we've developed, taking it from educators and professionals like you to everyday parents, teaching their kids and developing their leadership potential. That's what Kid Lead Academy is about. So talk to me about your bias with your own kids. What do you see in your own kids, and why do you think parents ought to take leadership development seriously?
Well, nothing prepares you for having teenagers like having teenagers. So, even though I had spent over a decade, developing young leaders, when you have teens in your own house, it's different. Um, but it is, like I said, to you, there's every season of parenting has its challenges, and every season of parenting has its incredible blessings. So, the benefit, my kids basically have had a front row seat their whole life to seeing leadership, all different kinds of leadership. They've seen, great examples. They've seen examples that, you learn and grow from some leaders. Here's what not to do.
Yeah.
They've seen it all. But I actually was recently talking to my oldest daughter about this because she just came home from a missions trip, and we were talking specifically about the ability of leaders and the importance for leaders to receive feedback. And this was, just most recently the conversation in my home. Because as a leader, that's something that I need to learn how to receive feedback. As my young leaders in my home, they need to learn how to receive feedback. But she had actually bumped up with a leader that wasn't receiving feedback very well. And
Huh.
so it created a little bit of a coaching moment in our home. So, I mean, there's so many things that, you talk about ethical leadership, developing the ethics in your children is so beneficial. But learning to receive feedback when you're young, learning how to not be defensive, that's a skill that not very many adult leaders have. And so I think it's really, really important
Yeah.
to nurture that.
What did that conversation sound like in terms of how you talked about it, or what she said, or give us a few more details of how that went.
Yeah, I mean, so she was just sharing about an experience that she had where actually was another student that had shared with a leader and said, here's some things that I'm seeing. And the leader actually got upset at this student for sort of overstepping. Obviously, as we're training young leaders, there's, to honor is very important, to respect is very important. But it's sort of it's two-dimensional. It's how the young leader or the adult leader shares that what they are seeing, but then also how we're receiving it. So, having that conversation with my daughter, well, maintaining honor and respect for the leaders that she was speaking about, but also coaching her along and, what kinds of things that you want to do. And really, it comes back to, if you were in that situation, you would want to be the kind of leader that receives the feedback. How do you separate your feelings of getting defensive? How do you separate that so that you can actually take in what someone is saying to you? One of my mentors always said, I'll take any feedback that people give me, because quite honestly, at least they don't know what's really going on in my heart and mind. And so anything they tell me is probably better than what's actually happening. So I think that it's really important that we kind of learn both sides of
Right.
that.
I love that. And I love the way that you nuance that, because I can tell you're a leader and you get leadership training, because you said it's how you give the feedback and it's how you receive the feedback. So it is both and, isn't it? It's not either or. And my true confession, I'm now right now 65, so I'm far more reflective of my life. But I think of how many times I did not receive feedback well. And I think that's one of the things we try to train, as you know, in our curriculum, is how to receive feedback for just what it is, feedback. It shouldn't be a personal assault, shouldn't be about us. It should be about how can we get better. And it's just so unfortunate that most adults don't do that well. And I can imagine when a teen, someone younger than us, tries to share opinions. And that's what young leaders do. They have a lot of ideas and a lot of opinions. Some of them are dead center on, some of them are off kilter. But if we dismiss them, we belittle them. And if we accept it, we encourage them and empower them. So talk to anyone who's listening about maybe take it a step further, Holly. Why should a parent, maybe who they themselves are not a leader, or maybe they're just so busy, why is it important not to defer it or delegate it to someone else, but to take on that responsibility of learning how to develop your child's leadership? Give us a one more step further of why you think it's important.
Right. I mean, as parents, we are invested in so many things. We're invested in sports and their spiritual growth, their education, their leadership is really something that they're going to take with them for the rest of their life. This is like so foundational. If you have a child that is a leader, they're going to always be a leader. They're never going to put down that leadership mantle and go, not for today. Like, they won't be able to do that. And so when you invest in their leadership development, you are investing in a skill that is going to propel them forward in life. They're going to use in every situation, in wherever they land, at school, at university, and their workplace. And so it's such a pivotal thing. The other thing that comes with that is, we know that ethics is formed, your worldview is formed at a young age. So if you have a young leader, I think that we have a responsibility as parents to lean in to developing them ethically, because that window of time is well, they're in our care. And so we need to be responsible to develop that and to create environments at home where it's being developed. So I think that I believe that parents are the primary they're the primary caregivers, people that are investing in their kids. It's great to even send your kids to Kid Lead or Lead Young. It's even better to be doing that and coaching them at home so that they're getting it on all fronts. They don't even realize they're getting it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So give us a couple of other ideas of things you've done project wise where teams actually led the project?
Well, we did this. We always would do a fall semester and a spring semester. So in the fall, they would do the Princess Tea. And in the spring, and it started a little bit more organic. They did things like a dodgeball tournament or like a film festival. But then they locked into a couple things like the Princess Tea. And then they locked into, we called it Easter Extravaganza. And they wanted to do, it started just as like an Easter family event in the park. So the first year, like they planned, to have inflatables, and they called Tim Hortons and got a coffee truck there. And
Okay, wait. Now just remind everybody, teens are leading this.
teens are leading this.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Completely student led. So again, the first year, I mean, there was a lot of people there actually the first year. I want to say there was over 1,000 people in the park the first year. And then they had these Easter egg hunts on the field for different age group, for toddlers and for elementary and for older kids. But the last year we did it, actually right before COVID, students are leading this. It was an outdoor event and it happened to be raining. So they needed to figure out a new plan. So they thought, we're going to host it in the church. Well, 3,000 people showed up to the church that day. It was like,
Wow.
I can't even tell you. It was like such a huge success that the following year, the students needed to go to the city and they needed to figure out an indoor space to host this in, partnered with the city of Burlington. Now, they started down that road. That was 2020. And then unfortunately, we were a couple weeks out from the event, but they had the city community center. They were ready to host thousands of people, and they were amazing. They just rocked it.
That is amazing, and I love it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with small projects, right? But these were huge projects right here. When you have thousands of people showing up, that's crazy. And it was all led by kids. I just love that. Before we wrap up, give us just a couple of maybe parenting young leaders tips, practical tips, and how you talk to them, how you discipline, because transitioning from preteens to teens is kind of a big deal, especially when your kids are wired to lead. How have you changed your parenting style to continue to develop them as leaders, as now young adults?
Yes. I think the transition caught me a little bit off guard for my oldest. I was still trying to, kind of more tell her what to do. Then it clicked. I was like, wait a second, she needs to be coached. She needs to be able to make some of these decisions. And so as a parent, there's still safeguards. We don't abdicate our responsibility for our kids, but you give them within a safety net, some options. Maybe some options that, and they're going to come up with these options on their own. And some options, I think as a parent, I'm like, well, that's not going to work, but the risk, it was still in like a safe zone. So we're like, okay, sometimes you need to learn through making a decision that has some consequences. Sometimes you need to. And so as parents, and especially parenting young leaders, they need to be able to have that lived experience. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. And so as a parent, I just, really try to within still a safety net, coach especially my oldest daughter along, and it's really changed the dynamics of our relationship. I think it protects the relationship. It gives her confidence while she's at home and she's not quite in university or college yet, but it's giving her confidence to make these decisions, to step out. The whole goal of parenting is eventually they're going to be out on their own. And so there needs to be this kind of in-between land that we parent, where we're coming alongside of them, but we're allowing them to make some decisions, even make some decisions that might be difficult. So
Yeah. Can you give us an example of what a coaching comment or conversation might be like compared to a traditional authority parent approach?
well, actually, we just had this conversation. I just had a conversation with my daughter. It was a little bit around like phone usage and social media. And I had always really been, you know, I'm able to like check anytime, you know, where accountability is really important. And my daughter wanted to just move the boundaries a little bit, not take away the accountability altogether, but move the boundaries. So I said to her, what do you think would be a good boundary, considering that we still need accountability, we still need because even as adults, I say I have accountability in my life, and so we don't just get rid of these things, but how can we move this? I'm aware that also she's going to be out of my house next year, and so she needs to learn how to regulate some of these things on her own. So she came up with a solution, you know, that she thought was good. It was probably a little bit down the road of where I'd like. So if I was here, she was here, and I said, what about here? She said, oh, I don't really like that. So I could have pushed it. I could have said, nope, this is where we're landing. This is it. I've already compromised. That's it. But I think there was wisdom in saying, you know what, let's give it a couple days. Let's both think about this. And then in a few days, let's come back to this conversation and see, you know, coming back to the place where, you know, receiving feedback myself, I have to be able to hear her out. So I thought to myself, I need to sit on this for a few days. Maybe she's right. Maybe she can handle a little more than I think she can. And she's pretty good at, you know, with her own space, coming to like some really wise decisions as well. So I thought maybe some time might give her some wiggle room. So we just decided to give it a little bit of time and come back to it. And we had a great conversation. So that's.
I think that's a great example. It reminded me of colleagues at work having a healthy conversation of differing views, you know, and I think that's really what we're looking for. Social emotional intelligence is parallel to effective leadership. We want leaders who have that ability to not just have it their way, but to say, let's talk about it. Let me listen to your side. Now let's both think about it. So I love that conversation because it is healthy. It's not you putting your foot down and, you know, your daughter slamming the door on her way out. It's so common. It's not healthy. So I applaud you. Holly, you are, and I know this sounds like a hyperbole, but you are a hero in my book. The fact that you already had a passion for young leaders, you used a curricula that just happened to be ours that teaches that, and you produced some amazing leaders, leaders that are raising the eyebrows of college presidents and in the community. And so, again, you're just a great model of not only a trainer, but also a parent who's trying to develop their child's leadership potential. So thank you for being a guest. We may knock on your door again and have you back, but we really appreciate all that you shared.
Thank you so much. It's been so great chatting with you, Alan.
Thanks.
Bye.